Have you ever been caught, Pinaki, in a sort of reply all chain of events?
I have. It's been a long time, I have to admit. And actually, when we were talking about this episode, there was part of me that was like, when was the last time it happened to me? And is it a thing? Do people even do it? And so I had to ask folks, in the organization. And yeah, there have been, and still continues to be. And we've seen it. And what also came up in the conversation was just the different types of reply to all email blasts and everything like that, which became fascinating to understand. What about you? When was the last time you've been in one of those?
I still remember it distinctly. It was actually, it was comical because it got just out of control. So a couple of years ago, someone had sent some sort of an email and they just wanted support. And so they thought someone gave them an email address that they thought was a support email address, but instead it was actually an extremely large group address, and it included thousands of employees, and I was part of this group as well. So it was a very specific, nonsensical operational message about logging a client into one of our systems, but I just remember it because it just yielded absolute gold. It was just brilliant because someone sent it out. And then the first thing that happened within probably about a minute, someone replied all saying, just a heads up, I think this was sent to me by mistake. Okay, so fair enough. So it was replied, but is that really a reply all? I don't really know. And then literally within a minute after that, someone else replied all saying, same here. And then within another minute, another reply, same here. And then me too. Then someone mixed things up, and then they replied all, and they said, please remove me from this communication thread, which I don't know if this person understands how email works. And then another reply all, and this person replied with, literally replied all with, everyone should stop replying all. And then the whole thing started to devolve into, so people start doing all caps, please stop replying all while they're replying all. And eventually there was one person that, it was so funny. They were trying to be funny and they replied all. And so there was a person, they grabbed a screen grab of, that Drake post meme of him saying yes and no from his Hotline Bling video. And so in his email, he said, don't be like Drake. And so with him, when he's dancing the no, he showed a screen grab of reply. And then the Drake with yes, he said, reply all. And he said, don't be like Drake. And I just thought, and then he replied all, obviously, with that. and I was just thinking, you know what, read the room. People don't want to get any more. I know you're trying to be funny and entertaining and bring some levity to all of this, but I think people were getting really, really frustrated. And so I think, it's kind of fun to talk about, just the reply all kind of phenomenon. But Pinaki, I just want to welcome everybody to this episode of Why Does It Feel So Wrong to Be Human at Work? So I'm Chris Lee from Gallagher Communication. I'm here with Pinaki Kathiari from Local Wisdom. And, we've both been for years now in the business of helping our clients create great employee communications and memorable experiences. And, in each episode, we're always talking about things in the workplace that just feel wrong, just like replying all. And, things that we've experienced firsthand. And things that we've seen when we're working with our clients and our colleagues, like I just mentioned, or even might have read about in the media. And the world is changing so fast, and it feels like we're using outdated practices sometimes and techniques that haven't really evolved, or at least evolved enough over time, that people just don't seem to question or make any effort to change. And so, Pinaki and I, we're definitely, we're not saying that we've got all the answers, but for us, this is a safe space. I say it's a safe space. We're podcasting to potentially many, many people. But I love that we're able to feel comfortable enough that we can ask some of the tough questions and provoke a little bit of thinking so that all of us can kind of maybe strive to get to a better place or a more courageous place. So, we welcome everyone to join us on this journey. as we challenge some of these so-called best practices, and maybe even dream a little bit about what a better workplace could really look like, and of course, by extension, maybe even influence society to some level. So, Pinaki, let's get into it. So, why does it feel so wrong? Why does it feel so wrong to reply all on an internal email?
And it's so funny, and it's like it's so like I think so core to us being human and the humanity in us. Actually, like your story reminded me of another story that has nothing to do with emails or reply to all. I think we were at a track meet, I think we were at a soccer meet, and our my son is playing, other kids are playing, and like there's this one parent that's like yelling at their child like, run, run, run. And it's kind of funny because I think like the coach or someone just turned to that person and say, they know. Like, like like you're not giving any useful advice, but you're just like yelling like run, and I get it type of thing. But it's like kind of you get caught up in this like energy of things. So like this anger or something, this energy comes up, and then we just don't think about it, and then I guess reply all. I was wondering, like in that conversation, I was like, how long does it take for me or you to like reply all in that scenario? Like, how long does it need to go for you to be like, all right, wait a minute, like we need to do something? I don't think I would have ever, like, especially for a blunder like that, I wouldn't reply to all at all. I'd let it like die down and stuff like that because it's just not the right communication channel for it, right?
Well, it's funny because when that was happening, a lot of my colleagues, it started kind of lighting up on the back end saying, Chris, are you getting these emails? And I said,
there was this another round of emails that came out.
yeah. No, so yeah, it actually started creating like a wildfire. It was amazing. And I remember, so I replied, but I was really careful just to reply to a select group of friends of mine that were on this big, huge email chain. And I didn't reply all. I just replied to very specific people. But my message was, oh, excuse me, I think I was sent this in error. And I sent it to just them, just pretending like it was a reply all. And people just, it was really comical. It's like, Chris, did you reply all? And I said, no. But I think to your point, though, like I think there's a social pressure, because I think what had happened in that sort of waterfall of other people kind of chiming and what are you doing? Stop replying all in all caps. It becomes like this contagion, this infectious thing, because it's probably, most people were probably nonplussed about it. They weren't really annoyed with it until someone else chimed in, and then they got increasingly agitated, and then they just want to join the chorus where they feel like, in that moment they just want to scream run, right? And I think I think that's kind of what happened here. So I just think it's a really interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, this made me think and wonder if the email storm or the reply all email storm is like equivalent to like road rage, like when you're stuck in traffic or something like that, right? Like someone starts honking a horn and then someone else, and then like this whole swell comes up. So it really made me think about that a lot, and like kind of, besides just the trivialities of hitting reply to all, like what is core behind that? And when I was looking into it, the first person to send a message like that was in 1987, Jordan Hubbard. He used RWAL, so it wasn't email, but he worked at the UC Berkeley, and he thought he was messaging every like terminal in Berkeley and on campus, but he actually sent a message to every machine on the internet. So it wasn't an email, but it was like a wild thing, and this was in 1987, so it's not like there were that as many people on the internet. But he also did get like a message back from Dennis Perry, at the time was a Inspector General of ARPA, from the Pentagon and whatnot. So it's so wild, and it was interesting digging into it and seeing like all the different types or scenarios that the comical ones at least have come out. Like I think in 2015, there was a Thomas Reuters had a reply all email storm that reached over like 33,000 employees. In 7 hours, it generated 23 million emails. And it was initially started because someone overseas requested his like phone to be reactivated. So it was some kind of weird like IT request that just went everywhere. And this thing hit like social media. I think you could look it up right now. It's like hashtag Reuters reply all gate. And it was just nuts, right? And there's been so many others. And, it's like, and it also made me think about like, why does it happen, right? There's these like blunder scenarios. But the other like story that I thought about that was like email chains and things like that, right? Like I remember I recently joined the IABC New York Tri-State chapter, and I got added on to a chain of emails that was like 6 months old. So it was like one reason there was this like reply to all email chain was, I guess, to keep this history of what's going on and decisions that were made in this project. So that was kind of one. And then I looked at like other reasons why people like do this like massive email or reply all like chains. This fact that, like, when I brought it up to the team made me think about it, because one person said, yeah, there was one like from IT, something stupid. Yeah, that's the one we know of. And then there was like someone who said, you know what, they actually sent an email wanting a reply from everyone, but they didn't get it. So it was like, so all right, we're here trying to get like consensus in one scenario, but we didn't get it, right? There was others where like, sometimes people, like you were saying earlier, like people want to congratulate folks and they say thank you, and then this like email storm starts up of just people saying thank you with no other context. And then there's like people that want to sound smart, I think, right? Like, the person at, various meetings who asks a question that has some kind of backdrop to it, like they're trying to either sound smart or advocate for something or do something. So, right. And it's funny, like I never thought about like those minuscule like examples as part of like a reply to all, but they all like feed into this concept that, we're using email to do something that maybe email is not used or best for. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think one of the things where I think people get sensitive about email is when you think about the workplace, Pinaki, I think, we're all, so many of us are time poor. We just don't have a lot of time. And there's a lot of organizations out there that rely very heavily on email. It's a broadcast channel. It's one to many. And it's not really always intended, a lot of corporate messaging isn't intended to be a dialogue. It's just to keep employees up to date. And, I think more and more employees are starting to feel the anxiety of, this inbox that has become really a triage unit, right? A lot of people are trying to control the bloat of unopened messages. I was just talking to a friend of mine. We just went out for a drink a couple of weeks ago. And she was saying, and she's in the communications industry, and she was saying that she lost control of her inbox a long time ago, and she hasn't even tried to get control of it. She's at peace with this, and she's actually just all but abandoned it, understanding that if there's something really important, people will find other channels to connect with her. And I thought, I thought it was a really brave way to go about it. But I guess once that expectation that, you're not going to get a timely response from me via email anymore, because I've just lost hope on email because there's too many people trying to come in via email. And email is that opening for, cold calls from vendors and from, you're getting it from all different sides. And so it's, I think it's the over-reliance for too many people for too many reasons to choose email as the channel. And so maybe part of it is just about channel literacy.
Mm-hmm. It totally is, like, and like, and channel etiquette in a way too, right? Because I think you started bringing up like email etiquette and like, here's things that we could do about it. Like for me, personally, I think I'm in the same same boat as your friend. Email, like I don't organize email. I'll like read through the things that I need to read through. But my best friend in email is search. So if I'm like looking for something, I'll like search for something. But in my email etiquette, I rarely send emails for anything besides something that's really logistical. Like, let's meet at this time, or let's meet over here, or we're going to talk about this, or here's a document that we're going to talk about when we do this. So it's just very like straightforward. And if I send something long, it's usually prepping for something that we're going to be talking about in the future, right? So, one of my pet peeves, maybe it's a little stronger than a pet peeve, I'm not sure, but one of my peeves is when you have like more like complex conversations over like text message. I just can't deal with that because so much is lost in communication when it comes to text only, right? Like as people who are communicating as friends or as colleagues, like we learn so much more about each other through our eye contact or body language, to the way our voices go, right? So it's like so much of it is lost over email, so and text only. So I try to like remove any emotion from it and as humanly possible, right? Until that one person responds with the all caps, like they said, stop replying all, and then I'll stop replying. No, I'm just kidding. I don't reply all.
Honestly, I think the way that we use different channels, it's evolving all the time. So, for those organizations that are, think about how to use different types of channels within their own organizations, and they are enterprising enough to have that foresight to either do it themselves or work with organizations like Local Wisdom or Gallagher Communication or anybody else to help with developing a channel strategy. I think it's useful to understand how different channels should be used, so that way people are on the same page about when to expect what types of content for different channels. And there's one client that we worked with that no corporate messaging went through email. They made a conscious decision to reduce the traffic on that channel and instead use Workplace by Facebook, which they use at their organization to share corporate messaging, which I think is an interesting way, because I think it shows a respect for the employee experience and a respect for their time, and offering up a different way to serve important messaging as well. And so I think I think it's an importance to having a strategy around different channels.
We have modes of communication, and if you compare like our face-to-face live interactions with the digital interactions, it's really interesting, right? Like if you compare like a text message to us having a coffee together, right, versus a reply to all is more like us like honking at each other in like a traffic jam, right? So like we're trying to fit the right mode of communication with the right digital venue now, because we don't want to get into like fender benders and traffic issues and road rage and stuff like that, right? And that's what happens when you're not communicating well or in the right channel. It creates frustration, and when we get frustrated, we don't communicate well, right? So like even if like we were in a live conversation and say, I'm talking to you and like, I don't know, I get too close to you and it's like, wait a minute, you're in my comfort zone. So it feels awkward or weird. Or if I'm like sneaking up from behind you and saying, hey, like, let's have a conversation like this. It's weird. It's not the right avenue and venue. So like what you were saying, right? Like, let's take this thing that's happening. It might be like a reply to all. And again, if we maybe move the blunders out of the equation. So, okay, let's just say it out loud. If there's a blunder and a reply to all email storm goes out, do not reply all. It'll go away. It will go away. It will. Okay. But for the ones that are not like that, the ones that are like, oh, you know what? I want to debate this topic, or why did this project fail? Let's point a bunch of fingers at each other, or let's just celebrate this win and say thank you to people, right? For for all of those, like let's find the right venue for that.
One thing I was thinking about was I think part of the reason why, especially email, I think email specifically, I think is a source of sensitivity. And in Gallagher's recent State of the Sector survey of 2,000 organizations, not surprisingly, they found that 94% of organizations primarily use email as their channel. But what they found was that it was evaluated as 71% effective. So 94% use, but 71% effective. But then when you look at other types of channels, so the one that I just think about is, as an example, is text messages. So only 17% of organizations actually use text messages, but it rated as 76% effectiveness. So more effective, but way less used. And again, without a strategy, because the conventional thinking might be, well, okay, fine, then maybe I'll just start text messaging everybody for everything that we have to communicate. Now, obviously, that's not gonna fly well with people either. And so I think what people do at the individual level is they almost come up with their own system for what channels are used when. And my 15-year-old son, he's constantly texting with his friends, but he uses different channels all the time. Some of them, it's Snapchat. Some of it is Instagram messaging. Some of it is actual text messaging or SMS. And I don't know what his system is or how he decides which friends are which, but it dawned on me. The same thing actually happens with me and my own friends. Is there's sort of an implicit idea of what channels to use for which people. So I have some friends that love to message me on Facebook Messenger. My mom, my dad loves to just call me. He just loves to call me. So that's something you always have to be prepared for. My mom loves to use, in the Korean community, there's a tool called Kakao Talk. And so almost every Korean that I've ever known has a Kakao Talk account. So my mom loves to message through that. I don't post a lot of like family photos on Facebook or things like that, but we use a family WhatsApp channel. And so we use WhatsApp for posting media. And so it's kind of interesting. I think you almost develop intuitively a sense for what channels are appropriate for what types of content and for what audiences. But I find that doesn't seem to happen enough in workplaces. There's not enough of that intuitive, channel literacy. And so I think that's where it can be useful to try to set the tone in terms of what messages come through what channels, to make it a little bit easier to organize for employees. Because that's where, you do start to get the all caps reply all frustrations, because people are not necessarily, they're either unaware or they're just, trying to join the fray. I have a feeling some people were just trolling. They just wanted to add to the noise because it was kind of funny, but some people were really agitated by this.
No, it's true. It's some people make jokes out of it, but right. The point that you make, right, is that we create these alignments in which ways we're going to communicate. And like when I was like looking into like that traffic stuff, it's interesting because if like we all just knew what each other was going to do on that road, of course traffic would just move so much smoothly, right? If we could just drive in an even, consistent way. But as humans, we just can't maintain a steady, constant speed, and that was tested in research. And the same thing goes for like I think like when you're honking, right? Like in different cultures, there's different honks that stand for nonverbal communications, like "Hey, I'm coming," or "Watch this," or things like that, which is interesting. And it's interesting how like cultures then create this expectation of like how and when to communicate, right? And so there are things that we've been doing for like our entire history, like getting together for dinner or getting together for a coffee and things like that, or even working together. But when it comes to the digital era, it's just so new comparatively to our existence as humans. Even One resource that we created at Local Wisdom was called the Communication Combo Meals, and it's a template that internal communicators and leaders could use to literally create a combo meal menu of sorts of communications for your like top needs. So you could quickly just instantiate, all right, when there's an important message, here's the channels and how we're going to communicate it. So you don't have to make it up over and over again. And it's at least something that, everyone could look at and say, all right, here's the scenario, here's the communications that's going to address that, the way we're going to handle that. And it's helped a lot for just helping people just say, all right, we're communicating in so many different ways. Some are effective, some are not effective, and et cetera. It's just help companies to just standardize. When this happens, here's how we communicate it. And that helps. That at least gets us back to alignment, right? Because outside of the blunders, there is a need to communicate, and that's why these things flare up. And we just need a better way to communicate it.
Yeah, and because it's constantly evolving, I think it's just really important to constantly look at the channel mix, figure out what's still relevant, what's not relevant. So, when I think about my own experiences from when I graduated from school and the channels that I used way back when to, the mix of channels that I'm using today, it is substantially different. I mean, most of us don't have to look any further than 3 years ago when I think the video conference call, and this is technology. It's been around. It had been around for many years before the pandemic, but most organizations rarely really use it outside of maybe tech companies and startups. And so face-to-face meetings and landline conference calls were much more the norm. And almost literally overnight, if you think about it, Pinaki, this technology, which had been sort of gathering a little bit of dust on the shelf, all of a sudden was thrust to the forefront. And probably most of us now can't even imagine a world or even a day without a number of Zoom and Teams calls. And so I think, it's kind of funny how, generally speaking, we tend to be slow to adapt to change. And it feels like we shouldn't have to wait for a COVID or a global pandemic to happen before we evolve what kind of channels that we can use.
Yeah, it should. That is interesting too. There's kind of two things that kind of came up to my mind in what you're saying that I might want to see what you think about. Well, one is like in our personal lives, like you were saying, like the WhatsApp channel opens up and the text message versus email versus Zoom with the family or whatnot. I'm sure, and I'd love, because it's similar to in our family as well. But it's typically someone that like says, "Hey, let's move on WhatsApp," or somewhere it starts, and then everyone starts getting on. So I think you always need someone to like instigate or start, or a first follower or something like that, and then it starts like catching on. And granted, it continues to work and fulfill the communication needs, it'll stay, right? So, and that's why it becomes important to at least, put it out there. It doesn't always naturally happen in our organizations because we don't all come from the same culture in our organizations, right? We're all like a mix of different people from different places coming together and then trying to figure out how best we could communicate, The second thing was like the comment around like the pandemic or something like that, right? It's I think what happens in the world becomes an instigator for communications as well. So sometimes it just is, right? I think that like the situation warrants a new type of communication or whatnot, like it is wild. Because, even as our life changes, like the way we communicate changes, and it makes me think of like, you were saying earlier, in my high school days, the way my best friends would communicate with me would be just to like knock on the door and be like, "Hey, let's go out." And we just walk outside. And now we're, married and families, and we have to like schedule things like weeks in advance before we could possibly get, so it's the way we communicate over time changes. And so the channels change over time. So it is always going to be an evolving thing. we just have to continue to put thought into it as far as, is this channel the right one? Is it getting us to the place where we want to get to? Is it narrowing down the ideas, or is it kind of flaring up into, or devolving, is it spiraling up or is it spiraling down? And that's really what we want to help talk about today, is like, let's just look at this, and leaders, people, managers, everyone, let's help quell like the email storms and get the right conversations on the right channel.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, I think my teenage son, one thing he's conditioned me to understand is he will never, ever answer the phone if I call him. No matter where he is, whatever he's doing, it doesn't matter. He will never, ever answer his phone. And so I've been conditioned now to understand, like, if I want to get in touch with my son, I'm going to have to text him. I just know that now. And again, it's, I just think about, and that's just with his world and kind of how we communicate, is I have to find different ways to try to reach out to him. And, it's sort of understood that, if I want to reach him, it's got to be via text message.
That's the probably the fabulous and best advice that we could give here, right? Is like, listen to the needs of your audience and the people that you're communicating with, and let's meet them where they are or they want to be, right? Because same boat, right? Like I text my son to come down for dinner, because it's like that nowadays. So we have to find that common ground and work together. And I think being flexible, malleable, and just keeping an eye out for it, right? So it's just like, let's just not do the same thing over and over again and expect different results, right? As there's a lot of things, right?
For sure. And I think the other thing, we started by talking about reply all, or even just the general apprehension that employees have to email or broadcast something to an all company email. And I think there's apprehension because most people are not comfortable talking to large groups because, there's a fear that I might say something wrong, or I'm going to look stupid, or, I might have a typo in my email or things like that. And, because of how employees and their relationship with the workplace is, those are things that sometimes people think will be a strike against you. It's like, I think I missed the promotion this year because I sent out that all company email that was with good intention, but an SVP said that this is, this doesn't make sense, or those kinds of things. I think it's the same thing that happens in, big company town halls. Sometimes when, there's a call out for questions or comments, especially comments, in less organizations that are less psychologically safe, it's more likely you're going to get crickets. People aren't going to want to speak up for fear of, again, all the same reasons. They just don't want to look dumb or say something that someone might have already covered off, for example, and they just kind of spaced out. And so I think there's a little bit of that vulnerability as well with employees being able to speak in front of larger audiences, even though with social media, we as people, we do it all the time.
That's so right on. It's a really interesting way to look at your employee experiences through like email chains and things like that. Like, what does it feel like? What do those email chains feel like? Do they feel like they're progressing, or do they feel like they're devolving, right? Because you're right, there is a level of vulnerability, and psychological safety in your organization will allow people to show more vulnerability. And I think when you have that, you produce better, you communicate better, things move smoother in your organization. And I think that's where we want to get to.
Yeah, and I think part of the difference in the dynamic is really that, when you get a corporate message from, let's say, C-suite, it's a very polished message. Sometimes it's even designed in HTML. Someone else is typically writing it, and so it's almost an unfair comparison, because every message you get from the president that goes out to the entire company, it's generally it's going to be polished. There's not going to be any typos. It's going to be well written, well crafted, well thought out, and there's usually a team behind that message, versus the average person who might craft an email. They're just doing it by themselves. They're not typically going to have it peer reviewed. Some people might, just because of the anxiety of speaking to a larger audience. And same thing with town halls. Again, it's usually a prepared speech. There's usually a deck of PowerPoint slides, and speaking points are generally very well thought out. And I think that's part of the gap in the dynamic, is that senior leaders will often have a very prepared stance and also have had conversations leading up to that, whereas a lot of employees are just hearing about things sometimes for the first time and they want to react, but it's so hard to say something without sounding stupid because you haven't been privy to a lot of these previous conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's another great point you make, because if leadership and doesn't show that they can be vulnerable, then people will not be vulnerable in the organization, because it's not an organization that accepts vulnerability. So an organization that accepts vulnerability accepts it from their leaders or for everyone, and that creates a really nice glue. Any last words before I get into closing?
This was an interesting episode, and I think, again, it raises some interesting questions, but I think a lot of those questions can be at least solved for, at least considered by organizations thinking about what does our own channel strategy look like, and just spending the time and energy to really think about taking stock of all the different channels, or even potential channels that you might not be using at all today, to create for a better and safer experience for employees where they can have their say.
That's right on, because all we're trying to do here is cause less friction in the workplace, right? And so, that's it for this episode of Why Does It Feel So Wrong to Be Human at Work? Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and checking it out. Had a really good time in this episode talking about the blunders, the history, and some things we could do about it. And let's just give that reply to all email storm that started with a weird blunder or mistake just some grace and stay quiet. And let's give important topics the right light and environment to really be valuable to the organization. When was the last time you were in an email or reply to all email storm, and what did you do? Did you reply all, or did you not? Did it quell itself? Let us know. We're on LinkedIn, TikTok. You can email us at whydoesitfeelsowrong@localwisdom.com. Thank you all for listening. Tell your friends. I'm Pinaki Kathiari, CEO of Local Wisdom, and joining me is my partner in game changing the world, Chris Lee, Vice President of Communications at Gallagher. Let's give a shout out to Local Wisdom. Chris, in the State of the Sector report by your company Gallagher, 2023 is revealed as the year of recalibrating internal communications, noting the scope of internal communication continues to expand into all areas of the organization, well-being, culture, and employee experience, putting under-resourced teams under considerable pressure. So if your comms team is feeling overtaxed or overwhelmed, if you notice that it's hard to sustain progress, you're not alone. Local Wisdom could help. Check us out at localwisdom.com. Make sure you follow us at Why Does It Feel So Wrong? And thank you, everybody.